Alright then, hello, good evening, welcome to Season 10 of AOR GT3 PlayStation League, here for round 1 of the Tier 1 split of this league, starting at Spa for a 90-minute race, and yeah, it'll be a big challenge for the drivers right to begin with. Always an exciting circuit, and 90 minutes will definitely be a test for the drivers tonight. Also going to be a test for me. This is my first effort at commentary and 90 minutes on my own, so we'll see how that goes. I might be quiet at points while I just have a drink of water and try and save my voice from dying towards the end, but looking forward to a good race here today. We've got a few new drivers into the league, as well as some familiar names, and a few drivers as well promoted from Tier 2. So that will be interesting to see how they deal with life in Tier 1. So far on the practice timetables, looks like they are at least there or thereabouts. So there will be some good competitive close racing altogether today, hopefully. Time's already tumbling at the end of practice, just a couple of minutes away from qualifying. There is a chance of variable weather in this, but the likelihood is that it will be dry qualifying session. I would assume pole will be in the 16s now. I have been surprised by the pace tonight. I was initially expecting it to be the low 17s, but we've got some very quick drivers here, so I think I'm in Michelin Man's time there. 2:16.7 in practice, if he can repeat that in qualifying. Yeah, it's going to be some very quick lap times in qualifying, but it's a long race, 90 minutes. Anything can happen. Qualifying is definitely not the be-all and end-all. Sorry about that, just double checking all the audio's working, that you're able to hear me. One or two people I think watching, if anyone is able to just confirm that everything sounds good, audio levels, game volume, and my voice is all balanced, but I think on my end it all sounds alright. So yeah, just coming around to qualifying soon, and it should be a very, very competitive field. It is a strong track for the McLaren here. There will be a bit of a balance through the season that will even out here or there. We do have a slight variety of cars, although it is mostly the Ferraris, Porsches, Lamborghinis and McLarens. We've got Yip 242 in his Mercedes, pretty much the odd one out. Looks like most drivers have settled into the pits waiting for qualifying to start, and we will be doing the exact same. Thanks, Coca. Nice to hear everything's working. So, last few cars going to come around and finish their laps. We'll dive into qualifying, and we'll see what the pace is, and double check whether there's any weather involved. But I think the majority of the drivers here will be hoping for a dry qualifying start of the season. It's usually easier to get into your rhythm without that unexpected weather involved where you're not quite sure on your tyre pressures, never quite sure on the setup if you've done most of your practice in the dry. But we got, I think, just the 111 car, Bonneval, last to come round. Oh no, we have one more. Pren still halfway around the lap just to finish this practice session, keeping everyone nervous and ready for qualifying, all getting their setup sorted. So 22 drivers to start the season tonight. Not quite a full tier of drivers this season. We are, well, technically 29 in the league, but a few reserves, a couple of them racing tonight, and a few sign-outs for this race. But still plenty to make things interesting and give some good close battles. As we watch Pren come round to finish his lap. And then the real fight begins.
Green light, go, go, go.
And here they go. All jostling for position on the way out of the pits, I'm sure. We'll see who we got first out. It's Michelin Man looking for a clean bit of track. And just behind him, can't quite see who that is. Potentially Bleeding Sunrise in the Porsche, I think. So they'll be their first 2 rounds to set a lap, all going well for them. And see what the pace is like to start with. Dry conditions, so I'm sure many sighs of relief amongst the drivers there, just to kick things underway in a controlled and expected manner. Quite a few drivers still sat in the pits at the moment, so looking for a bit of track space, I imagine. Big gap in the middle, but as always it tends to bunch up at the last couple of corners, so I think a few people bearing that in mind and making sure that they've got plenty of space. Obviously Spa should not be the biggest issue for traffic in qualifying. It is a long lap and we do only have 22 cars tonight, so it would be disappointing if anyone encountered any traffic, messed up their laps. I'm sure they will be doing their best to leave themselves some space anyway. Let's go back on board with Michelin Man and see what he can manage in his first effort. Got to be a strong contender for pole position here today. Always a very, very quick driver, and as I said, the McLaren is a strong car around this track, so I think it is there for the taking for him. Absolutely not guaranteed. We've got a number of other drivers that could compete. Bonneval looking quick in practice as well, but here we go. First lap for Michelin Man, clean through La Source and heading down to Eau Rouge. Absolutely flat through there, should be for everyone in qualifying. Looks nice and tidy, so off to a good start here. Usually first lap's not the most important, tyres still coming up to pressure and temperature, so these will almost certainly be times that are beaten later in the session, but always nice to get a lap on the board. Make sure you've got a banker time and you can then go on and push further. Nobody wants to be running around the last couple of minutes in qualifying having not felt like they've set a representative time. We'll see if anyone finds themselves in that position later. All looking nice and tidy from Michelin Man so far. I don't think he's invalidated, so this should be, assuming he can get the last couple of corners right, a lap on the board, and we will see what the pace is set at to start this qualifying session. There it is straight away, low 17, so 2:17.325 for Michelin Man. Jazzman a couple of tenths back, Bleeding Sunrise a little bit further off. Bleeding Sunrise usually a good contender in that sort of second pack of drivers behind the quickest guys that tend to be fighting for the race wins, so he will be looking to get a bit closer than that as Michelin Man runs off there. Jump on board with Dennis Van Eyck towards the end of his lap. Dennis promoted from Tier 2 for this season, showing some strong pace in the Ferrari in the pre-season evaluations and his qualifying hot stint, so look to see what he can manage. And I've jumped on board with the wrong car somehow. Dennis has finished his lap, so slowest for now, but I'm sure we will find some pace later in the session and hopefully challenge the rest of these drivers. Be nice to see him competing, as there's a wide moment I believe there on his second lap, although the track limits can be quite forgiving there, but I think that may have been just too much for Dennis there, as he has invalidated his second lap. So a few drivers yet to set a lap time, but at the top of the pile it is still Michelin Man with that opening lap, Jazzman P2, Bonneval also close in P3. My fellow coordinator Esfel Scott in P4, just bridging that gap, and then a couple more of the Porsches lining up there in 5th and 6th, so looking quite strong for the Porsche as well. We'll see if they can mount any challenge, but pace set on early on has been strong. We will see if anyone can break into the 16s. Got Jazz just coming around to finish his second lap, and he does hit Michelin Man, so a 2:17.2, and I imagine that will not be the last improvement. There will be another response from Michelin Man, and this fight for pole will continue. Tinnis as well, down in 18th. Tinnis into house, always a contender, always quick in the Lamborghini for this season. He has won previous AOR GT3 championships, and I'm sure he will be looking to set a good lap time and get involved in that top battle for pole position, and make sure that he's got a lap that doesn't mean he has to come back through from the back of the field, but still plenty of time left for the time being. Have a couple of new names for this season, so Lyric Sim Racing, CZ Adam, Don Michaelo and Sir Skov, as well as Bonneval, who's already making a strong start up in P3, so I will have a little bit more finding out to do about their pace and general driving styles and behaviour, but other than that, I've raced with many of these people quite a lot, so interesting to see where they fit into this. Obviously Bonneval already looking like he's going to make a challenge to our established quickest drivers in the league. So who else have we got yet to set a lap time? Let's go on board with Tinnis and see where he is through the end of the lap. I believe this is a valid lap currently. Always hard to tell on the spectator cam, having to jump away from him for a second, but indeed, this is a valid lap for Tinnis as it stands through Blanchimont. That's still within track limits. Clean run through the bus stop for him, he'll be hoping, and see if he can challenge up the top of the pile. P3, so not a bad lap from Tinnis there. Still a little bit more to find potentially. He's got one more run to see if he can improve from there. And still 5 drivers yet to set a lap time, which they will be starting to be a little bit nervous about that now. 5 minutes left. It is a long lap at Spa, so there probably is only 1 or 2 more opportunities. On board with McQuiz now through the final chicane. And that is round to start another lap. I'm not sure if that was an out lap or an invalidated lap, but he will definitely be looking to get a valid lap in this time, and then should have one. I'm not sure he'll get 2 more efforts. I think this is his penultimate lap, as someone else puts in a lap time, so there are just 3 now yet to post a time. Leading Sunrise takes the P5 slot and best Porsche away from Scott for now. And they're all looking incredibly close in the middle of the pack. 2 tenths between 5 drivers from P8 to P12. So any improvement on these last couple of laps could be a nice change in position for those drivers. And everyone wanting to be a few more positions further up, just in case anything happens. Eau Rouge on lap 1 at Spa can throw up some difficulties. Obviously a blind crest, and you don't want to be further down the pack if something's happened in front. But we will cross that bridge later. Hopefully everyone can keep it clean today, and we can get all our drivers through lap 1. No big damage and anyone having to pit early on. Looks to me like Leading Sunrise is backed off here. This is not a fast lap for him. Let's see if we can find someone. We've got Michelin Man coming round again. Has taken that P1 spot back from Jazzman for now, and will be looking to improve further and take that potentially out of his reach. But I think there will always be something left here. It will always be possible. It takes a lot to put a completely clean lap around this track. I'm sure all of these drivers feel like they've got some more to give as Michelin Man improves by a further 200ths. Just to eke that advantage out a tiny bit further. Check in with J Turbo Deluxe, our last driver to set a lap time, just coming through the 3rd sector now. And this will be his penultimate lap, so he will definitely be wanting this to put a time on the board so that he can have one final shot at it after crossing the line here. And there it is, up to P18. I'm sure he will be hoping for a bit more on his final lap, but getting a time on the board, very important there. A little bit of traffic round this section of the circuit, and I'm sure that will be a bit of a concern for Tinnis here with 2 cars directly in front of him. Maybe making a call either to back out and start on the next lap, or if he's on a quick lap here, he'll be praying that this doesn't hold him up through the bus stop. traffic moves out the way, so we will see whether this is a hot lap for Tinnis or if he is just preparing for that final attempt. No, so no improvement, so it'll be 1 lap left for Tinnis to try and bridge that 3/10 gap to pole. Few drivers already back in the pits and qualifying sessions over for Slicker, Dennis, Sharka, Surskov. Jump on board with Bleeding Sunrise, just finishing his penultimate lap. I think he's just going to get to the line to manage one more. And a big improvement there. Jumps Bonneval into P4, only 4/10 away from the front. Will Lyric Sim Racing get another lap? No, he's pulled over, so the last car across the line will be Scott Feld. So he will be the last driver to finish a lap here, so let's see if anyone can jump any more positions. And that's deep for J Turbo into the bus stop. That will be the end of his qualifying, and that is P18. Hopefully he can get that car out of the way quickly, as I believe that was Jazzman coming through behind. So does Jazz improve? Across the line he takes pole position, and we will see if Michelin Man has any answer to that. He is currently just coming through towards No Name. A little bit of traffic in front, but I don't think it should be close enough to affect him, hopefully. Whole flurry of cars to come through in a minute, but the big focus is this P1 battle. It's been close all session, no more than 2/10 in it between Jazzman and Michelin Man. This entire time they've been leapfrogging each other for the P1 spot. What can Michelin Man do? Tinnis improves his lap time, but it is still P3 there. A little bit deep at the final chicane, and that might just be it for Michelin Man as he backs off, and that is that done. Matthew Asbrook coming through the final corner as well. Can he find anything? Just a couple of tenths would be a couple of positions, and I think he just jumped ahead of Guido Christ there. I can't quite remember if he was behind as the session ends, but there we go. It will be Jazzman on pole position, Michelin Man a very close second, and Tinnis Cinderhouse P3. So very tight at the top and incredibly tight through the middle of the pack as well. Now, final preparations for our drivers as they get ready for this race. Like I said earlier, starting off the season with a 90-minute race, so that will be very challenging for all of our drivers to begin the season. But the most important thing is that lap one, keeping it clean, keeping out of trouble. They always say you can't win the race in lap one. It does not stop some people trying, and hopefully everyone will get through cleanly. Just a reminder for anyone that isn't sure on the rules, it is a mandatory pit stop, but there is no mandatory tyre change, so the strategy is open here. I would imagine without any weather interruptions it will be most drivers doing 45 minutes before changing tyres and going half and half on the fuel, but I have been wrong before. So just to summarise the rest of the grid, so top three already been through. Bleeding Sunrise P4, good effort from him. It looked a lot like Bonneval was going to be in that top four during the start of the session, but a great lap from Bleeding Sunrise. Scott Fell P6, Skov P7, Don Michelo, teammates in the Lamborghini there, 7th and 8th, and P9 for Lukitz Robbe. 10th for Pren, also a former Tier 2 driver, and then Rick MotoGP, again, not long ago Tier 2, showing a strong performance there in the Ferraris, 10th and 11th. Matthew Asbrook, always a solid, consistent driver, P12 right in the mid-pack, and Guido Christ just behind. Lyric Sim Racing, new to the league this season, decent effort, P14 to start off. Joe Powell in 15th, Shaka Zulu in 16th. Yip 242, 17th, lone Mercedes runner today. McQuiz P18,
30 seconds.
J Turbo 19th. CZ Adam, I think will be slightly disappointed with P20 based on the pace I have seen from him in the evaluation races, but potentially one to look for coming back through the field. Dennis Van Eyck on his first foray into Tier 1, P21, and R. Slicker in 22nd in the Lamborghini. Usually a very strong racer, very consistent, but qualifying not always the strongest for him. As we try and get on board with a driver that's actually in the race. Unfortunately, my car is sat in the pit lane so that I can jump through the cameras successfully. For some reason, the spectator mode not quite working for me. PS Vid's saying, didn't Tennis try one set of tyres at the 90 minutes of Kyle Army last season? I can't remember, very possibly. But I would say it is not really likely around here if it is a dry race. But who knows, weather could intervene. It is a 90-minute race, we've only got 30 minutes of that weather forecast. So we will see whether we get any weather. It looks fairly sunny at the moment, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as the race goes on. All the drivers now just making sure tyres are up to temperature, probably holding the brakes slightly just to warm up the brakes and then in turn warm up the tyres. You do see one or two drivers weaving a little bit, but the key thing here is brake temperatures to warm up the tyres. Very shortly we'll be underway for the true beginning of season 10. Obviously everyone looking to qualify as high as possible, but this is the key start. This is where your race settles in, and hopefully you will make it through lap 1 or even just Eau Rouge. I'm sure the drivers going up the Kemmel Straight, if they've survived that far, will feel that slight relief just to know that they've got past the first obstacle and that they can settle in, find their rhythm and start putting in the lap times. So, just coming round through Stavelot. Shortly they will get into the 2x2 grid formation. It seems to take an absolute age around Spa as the nerves are going. It will just keep you going at 30-40 miles an hour towards the end of the lap. And of course the rolling start takes place after turn 1 here, which is a blessing. I think La Source would be even more chaotic than Eau Rouge off the start. Obviously a very short run from the start finish line to Eau Rouge and a very, very tight corner, so Eau Rouge will be the first challenge. It usually ends up being 2x2 through there, but if someone gets a good start, it can throw things out of order a bit, and there might be an optimistic attempt from someone, everyone needing to keep their wits about them just in case there's any incidents that they need to watch out for. So here we go, into formation. Jazzman to lead the way off the line. Will he hold on to it? Will Michelin Man get the launch? Will someone else, or Tinnis or Bleeding Sunrise, be able to do anything from the second row? So here we are, they'll be rolling along on their speed limit, making sure to keep in their allotted grid slot and looking for no drive-throughs off the start as we get ready to go racing.
Green light. Go, go, go.
And there it is, the green light. Looks like Michelin Man's got the better launch, tiny bit of side-by-side contact. But so far, so good. Looks like everyone's through, and Michelin Man takes the lead. Jazz will tuck into the slipstream and look to see if he can do anything up into Les Combes, but at the moment, that is the position taken, and Jazz simply has to slot in behind as the timing screens go crazy, struggling to work out who's done what. A little bit of jostling in the mid-pack here, but everyone through safely so far, just some slight contact. Tinnis holding on to P3 there. I lost him in the timing screens for a second and wondered if he'd disappeared somewhere in the entry to Les Combes, but he is still hanging on, although there is just small gaps already starting at the front there. Always tricky at this stage when you're just looking for your braking points, cold tyres. Nobody wants to run into the person in front of them, but it seems that everything has been clean so far, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to say at the start of this season. Everyone's still in it, and plenty of tight gaps. Top three still absolutely tucked in behind each other. Tinnis getting quite a run there, right behind Jazzman coming into Blanchimont. These two very close, or they will be in a party chat together, they will be communicating. We'll see. It's actually Jazzman that almost has an opportunity, but Michelin Man goes defensive, and everything will stay the same at the end of the first lap. Since Eau Rouge, where Michelin Man managed to jump Jazzman off the line. Behind any big gains or losers from that lap one, looks like Rick MotoGP's lost a couple of positions. CZ Adam up quite a few, I believe he started P20, so that's 4 positions gained there. Guido Christ, the big loser, down to P20, he won't be happy with that one. Not sure what happened there, but still running, still looks to have the steering in a straight line, so was a wide moment through Eau Rouge as he finds the line through there on the heavier fuel after qualifying. But I'm sure without damage on that car I would expect Guido Chris to start to make his way back through. In fact, he has already got past Yip 242, just yet to update there. That is the Mercedes driver behind him in his mirrors. And next up on his list will be J Turbo Deluxe. So, couple of gaps just eking out over a second, it looks like. The top four have pulled away slightly from Bonneval and the McLaren in P5. Bleeding Sunrise doing very well to hold on to the top three. A little bit of battling amongst them and he'll be trying to see if he can get involved and nick a position. All very close in the mid-pack. Sharka, Matthew, Rick and Lyric Sim Racing. Not much between them as Rick is desperately trying to stay in Matthew's slipstream ahead. Almost shaping up the inside into Blanchimont in front there, but that would be a very bold move. Into the bus stop might be more likely, and it does look like he's going to go for it. Does he make the apex? Yes, he does, and Matthew backs out of that one to fight another day. So that's a position gained for Rick, back up to P12. So fastest lap currently with Jazzman, so Michelin Man taken P1 but is not going to pull away straight away, and that is a wild off-track moment for Jazzman. I did not see him lift, so that may be a warning for track limits already, and you only get 3 of those on the 4th one. That is a drive-through, and at Spa that is a race-killing mistake. Obviously an incredibly long pit lane at Spa, and you will not come back from that very quickly, so track limits are very important for people to adhere to here. As Jazz sends one round the outside, it is a difficult corner to go all the way round, and he's off track again and has to settle back in behind. But this looks like it may be a close fought battle for quite some time in this race. So just a little split in the pack behind Pren. Sharka Zulu at the front of this, maybe just not quite in the rhythm yet, or maybe being pressured from behind. We'll see whether he starts to bridge that gap again, or whether that is where the pace lies. I'm sure he'll be just wanting to focus on his apexes and not have to deal with a car behind, but he does have a whole line of, well, mostly Ferraris as well as Matthew in that Lamborghini in his rear view mirrors, so it will be tricky for Sharka to just focus on his own thing here, but he is not currently being attacked. And somewhere, Jazzman, oh, they are side by side. I thought that was a done deal, but through turn 1, Jazzman just a little bit deep, and Michelin Man back in front again. So that red McLaren still leading the way, and Bleeding Sunrise making the most of this and still right with them. Tinnis defensive slightly there. Will Bleeding Sunrise send it? No, Tinnis is deep. That is a big moment, and slight contact with Jazzman. but everyone's still alive and still going. But I think that was more of a defensive move from Tinus, just slightly outbraked himself up the inside. There wasn't any intention of trying to make a move in front, but everyone's made it through, everyone's still in the same order, but this is inviting Bonneval back onto the group as well. So the front three, who I thought may pull away in this race, still very much being kept honest by the pack. This could be an incredibly tense first stint and a lot of wheel-to-wheel racing for these drivers. Pren looks like he's got the most relaxed bit of track at the moment. He's got a small gap in front of him and a slightly larger gap behind him. I'm sure he will not be complaining in P10. A bit of clear air, just keep those tyres in the zone, don't over push, don't take too much out of them at the start. They will have to do at least 45 minutes on one of their sets of tyres in this race, so it is a factor tyre wear where in some of the shorter 1 hour races with the mandatory tyre change it will be less important to look after them at the start of the stint, but he's still in touch with Robe and Scott in front, so he will be still looking at his lap times and hoping not to let those guys get away. Rick behind has made a move past Shaka Zulu, so we did not catch that one in board, and Rick has pulled the gap immediately, so it may be that Shaka Zulu is not quite on the rhythm he wants to be at the moment. And we have Lyric Sim Racing with a very good run there as well. The Porsche not seeming to have a huge amount of straight line speed, and Lyric Sim Racing going to attempt it round the outside of Les Combes. All squeezed a little bit and a bit more contact on the exit, but Lyric Sim Racing just squeezes the front. I think that may have been a little bit of a light flash from Shaka, who potentially was not the happiest with that move, but hard to tell from that TV angle whether he was pushed a bit far off on track there or whether that was really a move he needed to concede the position slightly earlier. But again, no spinners, no big damage. It looks like everyone is still going strong. Not very common, I wouldn't say. Usually at this point one driver at least would have had some kind of incident to put them off the back of the pack, needing to an early pit stop, but fortunately today it's going well. And nobody really dropped off the back either. We've got actually Dennis Van Eyck and Slicker just swapped positions there, so maybe a moment for Slicker there, as he does seem to be just a second and a half off the back, but I am sure that he will gather that time up again and rejoin that group. Slicker in his customary purple and pink colours, always very, very recognisable. Regardless of the car model, it is always the same colour. Let's rejoin the battle at the front, and oh, this might be just the time for it, as Jazzman has got through, and I thought Michelin Man was going to send it side by side through Eau Rouge, but I think this is the first time that Jazzman has actually fully pulled in front, but that McLaren top end speed might be causing him problems as we jump on board with Michelin Man. It will be round the outside of Les Combes. I believe Jazz is still on the inside. That's very, very close, and still there, a bit more contact. I mean, rubbing is racing. That looks fairly aggressive as we see Tinus coming in as well to make the most of that, so very, very unfortunate for Michelin Man there. maybe quite aggrieved with a little bit of contact and then lost the second position, but he's still got the pace, and I'm sure he will stick with the not the two Ferraris. I'm tell a lie. Tinus late change to the Lamborghini, and 4 different cars in the top 4 is very nice to see, despite the concentration of just those 4 manufacturers on the grid. And we still have the pack all together, so yet to really have a breakaway group. In fact, it's not really until P7 that we have any form of gap to the leaders, so this top 6 group still incredibly close. If anything were to happen, there's opportunities for Bonneval, Bleeding Sunrise, Surskov. In fact, as I say that, Bonneval has made his way past Bleeding Sunrise at some point, which I have missed again. Indeed, Bleeding Sunrise down to P5. Much tighter line through the apex of turn 1, but a little bit of wheel spin on the exit. Porsche very, very good on the traction, but just couldn't quite get the power down without the wheel spin there, and that will slightly compromise the run, but still close in and tucked in behind for the Kemmel Straight, making the most of that slipstream and looking to try and fight back for that position. As we check in with Guido Christ on his slight recovery drive, he has made his way back up to P15 after a disappointing start, and it is incredibly close racing there with Adam, who is going to throw it to the inside for Lacon. And that looks like that's a done deal. So Adam takes that P15 away from Guido Christ and will settle in behind Matthew in front. Positions changing hands left, right and centre here. It's a lot of close racing, and so far a lot of fair racing from what I've seen. Yes, there's been some slight wheel banging a few moments, but that will happen in GT racing. Hopefully all our drivers can keep it within fair limits and not push it too far. Oh, and what's happened there? Jazzman dropping down through the order into P9. So there's been an issue for Jazzman there, having just made it to the lead. Let's have a quick look at that replay, because that is a big moment in the race. Sorry to jump away from the live action, but as we have no cars on this replay currently, which is far from ideal. I tell you what, let's ignore that and keep a track on the live action, but definitely something has gone on for Jazzman there, and Tinus in the house now takes the lead in the number 13 Lamborghini, so that will be very disappointing for Jazzman in this first race. It looked like he had a slight gap in front, so that may have been an individual mistake rather than contact with another car. But he drops into P9, and given the closeness of this race to start with, that creates a lot of work for him. He may now consider an early pit stop to try and undercut some of these guys in front. But the car seems fine, he doesn't seem to be struggling with damage, so he does have several targets early on. Scott in front of him will provide very few opportunities, most likely, with obvious mistakes, so it will require a bit of work from Jazzman to make these positions. As Bleeding Sunrise has taken the fastest lap. So strong pace there in the 414 Porsche. Still hanging on to the front pack as well. And a very close run for Jazzman behind Scott fell down towards Blanchimont, and actually looks like Scott's not going to fight that one for now, which may be the sensible play in the long run, and I'm sure Jazzman will be very happy not to have to send a risky move there. Scott recognising that maybe his pace isn't quite there with the front runners, and potentially looking to stay close to Jazz and use it as an opportunity to get past Robbe or Don Michelo, or both of them in front. As that is a late show of the nose from Robbe, and it looks like he has managed to put off Don Michelo in front. That is a very cheeky tactic, completely fair. There was no contact, no risk of a crash, but just throwing his car to the inside. And now he is through, but that's a big moment on the exit up through Radion. I think he held it together and he is still there on the inside, but that move was done, but a mistake, and it is straight back. And a bit of an update from PS Vids there. Jazzman lost it on his own in the final chicane, no damage, so yeah, disappointing. An individual error, which is quite rare from Jazzman, and he will be ruining that, as he is now almost 10 seconds or so off the lead, and that will be a tough one to recover with the pace being very close in the top few cars. So Don Michelo managing to recover that position from Robbe after that quite bold turn one move from Robbe. We'll see, Don Michelo might be more aware of that now and realise that Robbe is going to send the dummy at points. Might be slightly less spooked on the next occasion. But close battles throughout the field here, very tough to know what to look at. We've got Joe Powell here, just sat in 19th place. Looks like he has just dropped back a little bit off McQuiz from what he was a second ago, as actually there's a wide moment for CZ Adam in front, and that is McQuiz through and into P17 there. Manages to keep that one through Blanchimont into the chicane, but I think Adam will be disappointed. That was a mistake through the exit of Stavolo that really did cost that position, and it was an easy move from McQuiz in a straight line as Adam thinks about it, and McQuiz actually turns out of the corner, looks for the cutback, but that is a done deal. And actually now JP3 is getting involved again. Can he do anything, as we are looking at a side-by-side into Eau Rouge, and that's going to be very close. I think we're all going to survive, but JP3 does have to cut across. That is a very big moment. Where did CZ Adam end up in all of that? We didn't survive, so actually a bit of contact there, and that remains to be seen from a better angle. Exactly on board with JP3, it did look like there was a small amount of contact, but some space was there, so very unfortunate to have that spin. Potentially got a bit too much on the curb. Not sure if Adam hit the wall there. The tyres will be squealing regardless, that they've been going sideways and scrubbing across the track. Might be an early pit stop needed for Adam as well, once he can fill up the tank and make it to the end of this race. back in the mid-pack. Looks like Sharka Zulu has dropped one more position. Lyric Sim Racing got past him at some point, and a slight struggle for Sharka, it looks like, compared to his qualifying. Maybe the qualifying went very, very well for him, and it's just not quite where he was able to keep the race pace, but still a solid, consistent P13, so he is under pressure from Matthew behind, although a little gap then to Guido Christ, so it is all starting to spread out slightly more now, as we do have an early pit stop. That's Bonival into the pits from, I believe, P3. So that is a early stop. Not sure if that's tactical or if that is some damage that he's picked up somewhere. We probably won't find that out for a long time, if at all. But if it is tactical, it will be potentially an undercut on the fresh tyres. Having said that, he will be pretty much having to fill up the tank here, as the other drivers are burning through their fuel, so the undercut may not be that strong, but we will have to see later in the race as the tyre wear gets a bit worse. Back at the front, Tinnis managing to pull a bit of a gap from Michelin Man. 2.6 seconds, so still well within range. Michelin Man's still able to see Tinnis, which will keep him motivated, being able to see that gap changing visibly on the track rather than through the timing pages. Each corner still able to follow that car in front, but Tinnis definitely just stretching his legs a little bit and starting to look like he might have the overall pace here. So that mistake from Jazzman costing him in that fight and gifting a very strong chance for Tinnis in the house to take the opening win of the season. And that's terrible news for Bonival. That is a stop go 30 for speeding in the pit lane, and that will end any chance he has of competing in those top positions. Sadly, that will be another pit stop for him, and we've got a moment. Here's yellow flags. Dennis Van Eyck has returned to the garage. That is Slicker, I believe, involved. There will have been contact there somewhere, as both drivers are back in the pits. That will not count as their mandatory pit stop either, so bad news for both of those drivers. It looks like there has been some contact between the two of them. Didn't catch that one, so not sure where that happened. Things seeming to have settled down a little bit in this front to mid pack, as everyone's just looking to close out their opening stint cleanly, starting to think about when they're going to pit, what opportunities they have. As we have another moment, it looks like Matthew is facing the wrong way here, so again, more contact potentially. Matthew, I believe, was in a close battle with somebody, I can't remember who, and that is not good news for Matthew as the car goes round again. Obviously the tyres screaming after that previous incident, and he needs to be careful here with the 296 car of Adam coming round behind, but he has successfully rejoined before. But that is bad news for Matthew. That car is not looking in good shape, so he will be limping that one back round to the pit lane to make his stop, unfortunately. And I think there may be damage on that. That may not just be the tyres, because there's a big struggle for Matthew there. So Jazzman continuing to try and fight back. Pace does seem to be decent and potentially just clawing some tenths back on Michelin and Tinnis. In fact, the gap to P1 around 12 seconds. So now he's got some clear air, seeing if he can close in a bit more before that first round of pit stops. Very key that he can get back in after his stop back onto track as high up the order as possible, having to make as few moves on the circuit as possible will save overall race time, but it does look like it may be a tough one even to get back onto the podium. Bleeding Sunrise showing very strong pace here today, and still holding that fastest lap actually, which let's have a look what that fastest lap currently is. Bleeding Sunrise with a 2:18.4, which is a very, very solid race lap here. If we remember, qualifying was low 17s. I can't remember if in the actual qualifying session we did break into the 2-minute 16s, but very solid race pace from Bleeding Sunrise and giving himself a good shot at a podium in the opening race of the season. We have some more pitters. Pren is into the pits. Matthew has carried on, so maybe it wasn't damage. Maybe it was just tyre temperatures there causing those spins. He will be disappointed with the time loss there though, but there is still battles to be had ahead. A very close battle still going on for P6 with Don Michaelo and Robbie and Scott all close together. Scott Fell just watching patiently as the two in front go side by side into Blanchimont. Opportunities may arise here, and that is all clean through Blanchimont, but compromised runs for both drivers. Robbie squeezing Don Michaelo on the exit there as they continue to run side by side. And on board with Robbo up the inside into turn 1. Really should have the move done here, and Don Michaelo has no option but to go for the cutback. Has he made that work? They will run side by side again down towards Eau Rouge. Robbo with half a car length in front, and that's a big, big moment. I don't think they were quite separate from alongside each other as Don Michaelo tried to tuck in, and that is a big, big crash for Robbe. That is heavy damage, and he does jump immediately back to the garage. So very, very unfortunate there. Disappointing for Robbe, who was having a strong race. Scott Fell gifted 2 positions there, up into P6 and clear air in front of him now. But a big, big moment. Sadly, the clean start we had in the first 10 minutes seems to have gone downhill as a few drivers have been involved in incidents now. Still only Bonival to have cleared his mandatory stop, so I believe when I saw Pren in the pit lane earlier, that must as well have been a return to garage after an incident, as the mandatory stop is still there for Pren. So there are some issues going on for drivers today. Still an hour to go, just under an hour in this race. Plenty of time to fight back, but it will be a disappointing start to the season for those people fighting for strong points and now having to recover from early damage. What close battles do we have at the moment? Looks like McQuiz is tucked in behind J Turbo. Guido Christ just in front. As that's potentially an off track for McQuiz. could be just within limits or maybe no time gained there, hard to tell. That throw rouge now. Again, a little bit of curb, but that should be within track limits. Quite aggressive. If anything, J Turbo Deluxe in front, taking even more of that apex, potentially too much. But yet to see any penalties for track limits so far. So 35 minutes in, everyone has kept it within the white lines often enough, as that's a big slide for Guido Christ, and that will give away the position to J Turbo, but just about recovers it back onto track before McQuiz can make the most of that opportunity. Maybe Guido Christ just struggling with his tyres there. Hopefully he'll be able to collect that up and keep it clean again, having made a decent comeback from not the best start for him. Around the sort of just outside the top 10, I believe, in qualifying, before dropping down almost to the back of the pack, has managed to fight his way back up a little bit, as well as taking advantage of some of those incidents that have happened, and is now just on the fringes of the top 10 again. As we have Joe Powell still close behind McQuiz, so plenty of drivers still looking for opportunities to make another position on track before their pit stop. As we've got Rob A in the chat, in the stream here, looks like that's a retirement after that big crash, or else he's still waiting in the pits after that damage. But it was a very unfortunate moment, that one. Looked like they were going to get away with it, but yeah, big crash into the wall. We weren't on board with Robe, but we did see him disappear, and almost impossible to collect the back end after that contact. Front left wheel to rear right was always going to end badly through the most difficult section of the track. But here we go with Joe Powell looking for a move on McQuiz here. They are side by side into Les Combes. Joe Powell 3 being shown the outside, but that is job done as McQuiz relinquishes the position, and JP3 will now set his sights on Guido Christ in front. One big winner this race, Lyric Sim Racing, who was not right up the front in qualifying, has, well, I've not followed him at all in this race, seems to have had a fairly quiet race. I've not seen anything, but has made his way up to P7, is close behind Scott Fell here, and looking like a very solid result on the cards if he can keep this together. Meanwhile, in front we have Jazzman just arriving onto the back of Surskov, and actually a wide moment for Surskov there, almost giving an opportunity to Jazzman. A little bit of a weave on the straight there, but no opportunity down into turn 1. Jazzman will be looking to try and make this move as quickly as he can. A gap to Tinnis in the lead, still very similar to what it was last time we checked in. As another big moment for Surskov, did very well to hold on to it, but that may well give the opportunity to Jazzman, who will get up the inside into Les Combes and surely that is a done deal. Inside line and a car length ahead, and Jazzman sweeps back into P4, so doing his best to make up for that earlier mistake. As Michelin Man makes his way past a little bit of lapped traffic, and only a second and a half is the gap P1 to P2 now, so Tinus with that little bit of pace midway through the stint to pull away from Michelin Man looks like he is now being reeled back in, so the fight is very much still on for the win here, and a long way to go in this race still. As we have Don Michaelo has also completed his mandatory pit stop, Matthew Asbrook into the pits as well, so that will be potentially the trigger for some more stops as people look to avoid those undercuts. Let's check in with Tinus out front and see whether he is looking to come into the pit lane. Through the final chicane, Tinus carries on, so still another 5-6 minutes to the halfway point in this race. Tinus doing a 2:19 dead there, so pace is still strong, and I'm sure with Michelin Man staying out behind him, he will not be too worried about any other cars coming into the pits at this point, as the gap to P3 has risen a little bit now. Leading Sunrise doing incredibly well at the start of that stint, but the pace has just dropped to the front two since then. And do we have anyone else looking to make a stop at this point? Shaka Zulu goes round again. He has a little bit of clear air, which I'm sure he'll be grateful for in this race after looking like he's had someone hounding him during the beginning stages of this race. Never easy to get your rhythm in that situation, but a strong showing so far. Still P9, kept it clean, and looking to see what we can manage in the second half of this race, I'm sure. Plenty of opportunities given what's happened out front. And Michelin Man closing right up to the back of Tinus now, so Michelin Man really finding the pace. Oh no, I mean the gap on the timing pages says 7/10, but actually maybe that was just the lapped traffic, as Tinus has now cleared it and Michelin Man actually being held up quite badly there. So who is that car? Number 87? It's Don Michaela, so it is one of the cars that has stopped. So Don Michaela not actually in a position where he has to relinquish the position to blue flags, as he has completed his mandatory stop where the leaders haven't, although he does now get out the way as Michelin Man actually pulls off into the pit lane. So I'm sure Michelin Man will be a bit disappointed to have lost that time to Tinus right around the pit stop phase, as he would have been hoping for a potential undercut. But the opportunity is still there. A good outlap from Michelin Man could bring that quite close as Tinus comes into the pit lane. You would expect next lap, but we will wait and find out as we have some more cars coming in. That's Lyric Sim Racing, that's slowed down nicely in time, maybe a bit too cautious on the entry, but much better than getting a stop go 30, so that will be no risk of speeding in the pits there. Rick comes in as well, so we are now into the pit stop phase for real. We have many drivers in the pits, so Tinus, Bleeding Sunrise, Jazzman continue, as does Surskov, Scott Bell, Shaka Zulu. So we do have still a few pit stops left to go, but this is the point where many are coming in, as we have Pren stationary on track. So what's happened there? That looks like a shunt. He's not parked that up quite a long way beyond the end of Eau Rouge and Radion. So is that a pit lane exit incident? We will not find that one out, and Pren's still yet to complete his pit stop, and I believe this is the second time he's now been into the pits. So not a good first race for Pren here, unfortunately. As we will find Tinus in this third sector and see if he immediately responds to Michelin Man's stop. So through the final chicane, and that looks like he is coming in, so Tinus choosing to cover off that undercut immediately. We are at the halfway point now as well, so you would expect any driver that hasn't taken the risk of full fuel, hoping maybe for some rain, to be coming in around this point. Jazzman in as well. Bleeding Sunrise will take the lead of this race for the time being, and Sir Skov also in from P4. Scott Fell will continue along with the fellow Porsche of Bleeding Sunrise, so it will temporarily be a Porsche 1-2. But the key question is, where is Michelin Man and where will Tinus come out in relation to him? Still a little way further back on track. Michelin Man currently just about to come through the second sector split. It is a very, very long pit lane at Spa. Always surprising how much time you lose. Michelin Man will be hoping that this outlap has been quick and clean and might be close enough to give him a run on Tinus up into Les Combes as Tinus exits the pit lane. Across the line, Tinus is moving out of his box now and heading up the pit entry, so actually it looks like Tinus should have this one covered off quite comfortably. So the undercut not working there for Michelin Man, and indeed Sir Skov is actually potentially going to get the position, so that is a poor pit stop for Michelin Man, and that will be very disappointing as he's actually dropped a position there with the attempted undercut. No sign of any weather as of yet, and with only 43 minutes to go, I think that may be any chance of rain out the way for this race. So those yet to pit, maybe one or two of them put full fuel in, hoping for a little bit of weather, hoping that the rain would come now and give them an opportunity to gain some places on strategy, but I don't think that strategy is going to work out today if any of them have taken that choice. Still very close on track here between Yip and Don Michelo. I believe actually Yip may have just completed his pit stop, and that is a position lost to McQuiz, although McQuiz goes a little bit deep into the corner, but Yip still bringing those tyres up to temperature. Very, very difficult to manage with the car directly behind you as you've left the pit lane, but he will settle in and see if he can keep pace with those now. Guido Christian as well, coming through that tight hairpin through the middle of the pit lane into the bottom pit section where all the garages are here. Guido Crest with a strong recovery race so far after a disappointing start. Looking like he might be in a battle for a top 10. And we still have Bleeding Sunrise out on track, having yet to make his stop and with some traffic to contend with here. He is coming up on a few of the cars that have made their pit stops. And of course that does mean they are not required to let him through under the blue flags directly, and actually Bleeding Sunrise now does pit from the lead, so getting it all nice and slowed down. That looked safe to me, no lockups, taking it easy. Definitely still a chance for a podium, and given Michelin Man's slow pit stop, is there any opportunity to even gain that P2? We will find out. As Scott Fell continues round again, he will take the lead to be fifth leader of this race, I believe. Plenty of dirt on those cars now after 50 minutes of running. Guido Crest on pit exit, actually down to 15th, and that is quite a big gap in front of him to J Turbo as well. So work to do for Guido Crest again. I wonder if there was any damage on that car that he was nursing during that first stint and has repaired in the pit stop, or else I've just lost track of where these pit stops will shake things out. But I feel like Guido Crest was up to P12 or something before the stop, so a little bit of time lost, I think, in that. So back on board with our net race leader, Tennis, looking relatively comfortable for the win now. That pressure from Michelin Man has been relieved through the pit stop phases, and now a 10-second gap to play with. Really just needs to keep it clean throughout the rest of this race, and that should be enough. Joe Powell also into the pits, or exiting the pits now, so only a few drivers left to complete their stops as we see how it all starts to shake out and what this race is going to look like coming into the final half an hour. Very bumpy pit exit, but successfully negotiated there, and Joe rejoins the race just behind Slicker. Next car in front on track, but Slicker already multiple laps down, I think, after the contact with Dennis Van Eyck earlier. And so the next car up for position is Rick MotoGP, 7-second gap there. And 333 Ferrari will look to bring the tyres up to temperature and make the most of the slightly fresher tyres in the second stint. Obviously we have had a quite large range in the timings of these pit stops, and still at the front Scott Fell, Shaka Zulu continue on, and it will be very, very interesting to see where they drop in, how long they can keep that car going if they have filled the tank, whether they make the call to try and do it on one set of tyres. I would not like to be the driver bringing a set of tyres home after 90 minutes around Spa. I believe the time loss will be too much despite the time saved in the pit lane. So you would imagine that that strategy isn't going to work out for those two, but we will have to wait and see. As Michelin Man is back past Skov, so back into P2. But I'm sure disappointed with that gap to Tinus. Obviously, Michelin Man taking the lead off the line, Jazzman with the pole position, but it was Michelin Man early on that led before Jazzman briefly took the lead back, and then an individual error has dropped him down the order, although the podium still looks possible, if not likely, for Jazzman with just 3 seconds to catch to Sir Skov. Although Bleeding Sunrise still there, having a strong race in the Porsche, pushing these top guys all the way and looking to see if he can just sneak that podium. So this does appear to be the closest, one of the closest on-track battles, though it does look like Jazzman is pulling away from Bleeding Sunrise, so maybe we do have something going on elsewhere. Although having said that, I believe the next thing that will be happening is Jazzman cruising up onto the back of Sir Skov, and that would be the net P3, so a big move this one if he can make it, and not a million miles behind Michelin Man still, so all still to fight for at the front of this race. We'll see what Jazzman can do here, how quickly he can get past the Lamborghini in front. Again, the confidence through Eau Rouge just not quite there for Sir Skov. We have seen him a couple of times not losing control of the car, but it does just look slightly on the edge, slightly under pressure, whereas Jazzman just seemed comfortable through there, and the gap closes right up. Right on the bumper, this might be it straight away, up the inside of the hairpin. And that will be move done, I believe. Sir Skov settles in behind. Not really worth fighting. I think the pace that Jazzman has, he was always going to get that move. Half an hour is a long time to defend, and Jazzman will carry on looking for another position. Sir Skov probably more worried about Bleeding Sunrise behind those two. Similar pace, have both had a strong opening race here, and we will see who comes out on top in what looks to be the battle for P4. Nice and comfortable behind for both of them. Lyric Sim Racing 16 seconds back in P8. We're yet to see where Scott and Shaka Zulu fall back into this order after their pit stops, but surely they're losing time now. In fact, let's go on board with them and see what lap times they are managing, as Scott's previous lap time 2:20.6, Shaka 2:20.5, so matching each other, but for reference Tinus doing 2:18.8, so those two Porsches out front definitely will be having to rely on either some time saved in the pit lane or the fresher tyres at the end of the race to bring them back some positions. As we join Yep closing in on McQuiz, this currently for P12. Looks like Yip had a better run through the bus stop and is really closing in nicely onto McQuiz, so we could see a move here soon. Right behind going up through Eau Rouge. Often you don't want to be tucked in too close as it can affect the slingshot effect you can get out onto the straight and the slipstream up the Kemmel straight, but still looked like a reasonable run for Yip there. Just couple of tenths back and probably too far to be looking for a move here, but it may well be coming in the next couple of laps, you would think. And once again, Scott Fell, Shaka Zulu continue round for another lap, so it does definitely look like they took the risk on the heavy fuel, hoping for some rain, which has not transpired. And now we have Bleeding Sunrise closing up onto the back of Surskov. Just not quite able to do enough into the bus stop chicane there, but Surskov gaining those positions in the pit phase, but just starting to lose out again. Michelin Man always likely to take it back, Jazzman fighting back through, but this battle will be hard fought. This Surskov will be hoping he can hold on to us. Bleeding Sunrise almost makes a very bold late call to push it side by side through Eau Rouge, decides better of it, backs out very sensibly there. Nobody wanting to end their race an hour in with an optimistic move there. Surskov defends until they come, and that will be a tough one to hold round the outside, and again Bleeding Sunrise just having to tuck in, but Skov's off. And that's heavily into the wall. That will be heartbreaking for Surskov. He will have reasonable damage on that car. In fact, that is big damage as the steering is completely out of line, and that will be another pit stop. And a very strong race very quickly unravels. Just a little bit of wheel spin on the exit there and heavily into the wall, so disappointing for Surskov. But good news for Bleeding Sunrise, and into P4 that should be comfortable to the end of the race now, you would imagine. Not likely to manage to fight with the top three at all unless something unexpected happens in any battles ahead, but comfortably in front of those behind for Bleeding Sunrise. So Skov managing to bring this one round relatively successfully, but it's going to be a big time loss coming back into the pit lane, and that will see him drop all the way down, and that will really hurt after a very strong first hour to this race. But it does often just take one mistake and it costs you. And again, the damaged car proving very difficult even to bring back to the pit lane. He's done well not to return to garage and bring it back, which does save some time, and there may still be a few positions to fight for, though that looked very close on pit entry as well. As we have Shaka Zulu finally in for his stop, so just Scott Fell at the front, left to pit, as well as Dennis Van Eyck and Slicker further back, yet to pit. And Sharka comes down off the jacks, and will he rejoin in front of Lyric Sim Racing? In fact, the gap is, no, Lyric Sim Racing is already through. So that should bring Sharka Zulu back into P7. No, P8. In fact, close to P9, so more cars getting through there than it initially appeared. Sharka down into P9, but if that's fresh tyres on that car, he will be in good shape as Skov does get his car back into the pit box. But already down to P13, it will be almost down to the back of the field amongst those others that have had difficulties in this race. Once again, back to this battle. Yip and McQuiz, 7/10 the gap. As Yip looks to try and close it down, obviously closed up before and then just looks to have settled into that slight gap, so maybe trading lap times here. Pace very similar. Looking just to try and turn that battle into a battle for the top 10. Don Michelo 4 seconds up the road. And still, we are yet to see our current race leader come in. In fact, the gap from Scott in P1 to Tinnis, although still large, is coming down 50 seconds. Obviously the Spa pit lane incredibly long, so it does take a long time for those gaps to reduce when one driver's made their stop and another hasn't. So Scott making the most of the laps led stat for the season so far. I'm sure that won't be one of the things in his mind, though. He will have been praying for some weather and hoping that the rain would have come at this point while everyone else was forced to pit before for fuel. But it's going to be sunshine to the end of this race, looking at the forecast. I think just in the background there, Sir Skov rejoining the track will come out in 17th, so just Dennis, Slicker and Pren behind. Very, very disappointing. Big crash in they gone. Jazzman continuing to make progress, just the 5.5 seconds back from Michelin Man. There could yet be a battle for the second step on the podium. It will take a good effort to close in that gap and then make a move, but definitely possible, seeing the pace that Jazzman's showing. In fact, Michelin Man is also closing in slightly to Tinnis, I believe. There may be some traffic involved in those gaps changing, but the gap down to 8 seconds where it was over 10 earlier, so Michelin Man trying his best to reel in that fight for P1, although I don't think it's going to be quite enough. As Dennis Van Eyck finally comes into the pits for his stop. Obviously he did have that incident with Slicker earlier. They both did return to garage and I'm sure would have put some extra fuel on board then, again hoping for some weather later on to bring them back into the race, but those laps lost, never really recoverable once you've had that incident, but still continuing on and will still score points for their finishing positions, so worth continuing, and still a battle between the two of them potentially, although it does look like maybe there is a lap between them even, so the damage to Slicker's car potentially coming off worse than Dennis's. Not many close on-track battles here. It is just this battle between McQuiz and Yip, which does look like the gap is holding steady just under that second mark. Yip doing his best to stay close and see if he can find an opportunity, but that will not help. He collects it, but a big slide through Les Combes. Well done to hold on to the back end. And I think a slight unhappy wiggle of the steering wheel there, just signalling his frustration at his own mistake. And that will be a bit of a reprieve for McQuiz, who would have been slightly concerned of that gap behind, and now can focus on his apexes and his racing line, just to try and bring home that P11 and see whether there's anything more possible ahead, depending on incidents. Or the gap's still not large in front. McQuiz just the 3.5 seconds behind Don Michaelo. Shaka Zulu another couple of seconds in front, and Joe Powell 2-3 seconds further up the road from that. So still concentration required for these drivers to bring it home to the end. Even if you're not in a direct wheel-to-wheel battle, every tenth still counts at this point, and I'm sure the concentration is starting to fade as we close in on an hour and 10 minutes through this race. I know my voice is fading, that's for sure. Back up front, Michelin Man continuing to decrease the gap to Tinnis as Jazzman remains the quickest car on track. He has taken that fastest lap from Bleeding Sunrise from earlier in the race, and is ruining that early mistake, I'm sure, as P3 looks like it might be the most he can get, but the pace is there. And finally we have Scott Fell into the pits, so his time in P1 will come to an end, but I believe he was very close with Lyric Sim Racing at that midpoint of the race before Lyric Sim Racing came into the pit, so it'll be interesting to see the time lost or gained on that strategy. I imagine at this point he will not be changing tyres, and that will be a refuel just to get the last 20 minutes through the race, which will save some time in the pit lane, but those tyres will be then struggling at the end if that is the strategy call that he makes. After that mistake from Yip, we are short of any very close on-track battles. Let's see where Scott is as he exits the pit lane. In fact, he is already making his way out the pit exit, and Lyric Sim Racing is coming through turn 1 now, so his strategy may well have worked for Scott, but he will be slow in these last laps. I am very sure that that was just a refuel in that stop, as he has closed in only 6 seconds back from Bleeding Sunrise now. But I don't think he'll be looking forward. I think he'll be looking to cement 5th place, which the gap behind, we'll find out in a second, 17 seconds back to Lyric Sim Racing. So 17 minutes to keep 17 seconds for a P5 there, and that strategy, despite not materialising with the weather, potentially working out well anyway, although hard to tell with a few cars dropping out from that sort of area with some incidents. But the top three battle continuing to look like it might just get closer and closer towards the end of this race. I think the gaps are too much. 6 seconds, 6.7 from P1 to P2, and then a further 4.9 P2 to P3. Jazzman trying everything he can. A 2-minute 18.1 that lap, really pushing hard to get onto the back of Michelin. In fact, he can see him, the car in front, just going through Eau Rouge there. That will be incentive. There will be every bit of effort put in to try and catch that by the end of the race. And still, we are yet to see a track limits penalty. So everyone keeping it nice and clean. Several corners round this lap where you can very easily get a track limits penalty, so we'll see if that brings anyone a cropper in the last 15 minutes. Seeing us out front with a little bit of traffic to deal with in a minute, but shouldn't be a big problem. Like I say, that 6-second gap should feel comfortable enough for him despite it slowly closing in. I'm sure he has it under control, probably driving just slightly under the limit to make sure he doesn't make a silly error, which is probably the most likely way he would lose this race victory. Sharka Zulu not far behind Joe Powell here. 2.2 seconds the gap, and in fact is that Joe Powell directly in front, because that looks potentially like that gap may have even reduced since that last sector split. So Sharka potentially on the hunt here for P8. Find out in just a couple of corners time if that gap has reduced. .1, so the gap has pretty much remained the same, but Sharka definitely will be pushing hard to try and catch that one. One of the last remaining close battles I can see running into this race. Usually the Porsche not the best on tyre wear, but the pace still seeming strong from Sharka Zulu last lap around. As I look for it on the dashboard, 2:19.5. And definitely closing in here. So this may be our battle to bring us home to the end of the race. We'll obviously keep an eye on those front three who are still slowly but surely coming closer together, but it does look a little too late really for both drivers. So Guido Chris did, I think, lose out in the pit stop phase because he is sat in P14 and a big gap in front to J Turbo. Obviously, I think the start of his race made things difficult to begin with, but will be disappointed in that mid-race drop, I would have thought. Yeah, again, not sure if there was damage involved. That might be something that I've missed. Didn't see a big incident with him involved, but he could have had some damage from an early contact that did drop in those positions near the start of the race. So Sharka continuing to keep the pressure on, although the gap remaining a second and a half at the moment. Joe Powell just looking to hit his apexes, keep it clean, try and ignore the car behind. Just 4 or 5 laps to go. Trying to keep that rhythm and not give any unnecessary opportunities, but Sharka closes in another 2/10 in the final sector and will be really looking for that one more position just to finish this race off. Meanwhile, Jazzman's pursuit of Michelin Man looks to have slowed down slightly. The gap completely stabilised now. 5 seconds between P2 and P3, 5 seconds between P1 and P2. So the top 3, without anything unusual happening, will finish in that order, as we have the 97 car causing a yellow flag in the final sector. That's Guido, Chris. That is a big moment on the entry to Blanchimont. So who knows what's happened there, because it's a very strange place to lose the car on your own. I didn't believe he was battling anyone for position. And Pren also, I think I just saw off in Eau Rouge, has also returned to the pit lane, so another late crash, which will be disappointing. Let's go back on board with Sharka Zulu and see if he can make anything happen here. The gap ebbing and flowing ever so slightly. Sharka definitely with a 10th or 2 each lap on average will be really wanting to get within that second and start to put the pressure on more. As it stands, Joe Powell not really having to look in his mirrors. He will be aware that Sharka's there, but Sharka really needing to just be a little bit closer, and then we'll be able to potentially force a mistake and create an opportunity. And there it is, the gap now under a second. This will be a close one to the end of the race. Both drivers looking like they're on the limit for Eau Rouge, making sure those track limits warnings don't come into play. A little bit of a slide off the curb there, not what Sharka needs at this point, but still right there and in the hunt. The view on board looking back from JP3, That Porsche definitely close enough to be a factor. Joe Powell using every bit of the track and more there. Spoke too soon. I was just saying how much the curve he was using on the entry, which you do need to get the best run, but actually running wide there. Didn't lift off, may have got away with it, but has actually gained some time there, so you would imagine that might have been a track limit warning for Joe Powell. But having said that, I think the timing split was just before that mistake, so the gap now as they cross the line, 1 second, so still not quite able to push it close enough from Shaka Zulu to really cause any issues for Joe Powell just yet. Still keeping an eye on everyone else, but it does look like this is one close battle on track. Shaka kicking the back end out up the top of Eau Rouge, Raddy on there. Race leader Tennis just coming through the bus stop at the moment, so most likely that will be only 2 laps remaining. It will be very tight across the line if my maths is right. So these guys not long to sort this battle out. Another slightly wide moment for JP3, and Shaka will be keen to make the most of these little mistakes, but he can't consistently bring that gap down. 1.1 seconds through the first sector split. What's the gap as we come through? That back end is keen to step away, and I'm sure Shark will just be praying that his tyres will give him enough grip to close this gap in. And with just 4 minutes to go, our first track limits victim, J-Turbo Deluxe, with the drive-through, and that will be very disappointing. He does have a large gap behind, but almost certainly going to cost him a position to CZ Adam, I would imagine, and potentially Bonneval, who's not that far behind either. It should be no worse than P15 for J-Turbo though. So, on to potentially their penultimate lap of the race. Shaka just the 8/10 behind, the closest he's got. A good run here would really start to put the pressure on. That's both again toying with the track limits through there. Of course, if they've got a warning in hand, then they'll be able to be a little more aggressive, but if either of these is sat on 3 warnings, there'll be big pressure through there. As the gap visibly reduced. Both drivers really giving it everything. It may only be P8, but every position counts, and a good race for both these guys. As I mentioned earlier, Joe Powell 3, Tier 2 until a couple of seasons ago, so potentially one of his best results as a Tier 1 driver, and I'm sure he would like it to be P8, not P9. Gap between Tinnis and Michelin down to 3.2 seconds. As actually J-Turbo on the mini-map actually completing his drive-through. I thought for a second there was an incident in front of our race leaders, but everything is fine, and I believe Tinnis will be okay to the end of this race, but I will keep an eye on that gap just in case. Again, just under 0.8 across the line. Shaka Zulu looking for a good exit from turn 1, and that slipstream will be coming into effect big time now. In fact, it didn't look like that was a great run for Joe Powell 3 through the first corner. This is nice and close, as surely the track limits there are being exploited to their very extremes. And again, Shaka struggling through that corner. Plenty of turning, but the grip just dying on those rear tyres and it not holding with him where he wants it to. Lap traffic in front again, or is that lap traffic? No, that's Rick MotoGP and P7. So actually this two-way battle will turn into a three-way battle as they come round towards the final lap. Tinnis crossing the line with a 2.6 second gap to complete his last tour of the circuit. You would imagine that is safe. Will jump on board with Tinnis at the end just to make sure, but this is an incredibly close battle here. 3 cars coming to the end of 90 minutes with under 2 seconds between them. Nothing really doing for either driver. Will Rick hang on? His pace has seemed to have disappeared in these last couple of laps. I didn't really factor him into this fight as Shaka continues to push, and I think almost over pushing and just losing control of the car. And now actually JP3 with the closer run. Can he do enough? He is right on the back and gets the better exit out of that corner. Is Rick fuel saving? Is that the difference? He's not quick on the straight. And this would be an optimistic lunge. The rubber banding going on there slightly probably won't help, and Joe Powell onto the curb, gets a little half spin, well, not really a half spin, a tiny little spin, just wheel spin really, but it's enough. It's that opportunity has just been taken slightly to sit right on the back through this section. As Tinnis finishes the race, and I've missed it because I'm on board with this lap. Michelin Man through for P2, Jazzman not far behind, and that will round out the top 3. Bleeding Sunrise again still very in touch with the top 3 and the podium finishers, but we need to jump back onto this battle because this goes all the way to the end. Both these drivers fighting for wins in Tier 2 a couple of seasons ago, now looking for P7, P8. And that's a big wide moment. It just keeps out the wall, but surely Shark will come through, and that is heartbreaking for JP3, looking for P7, but that's going to drop him to P9 on the final lap, just struggling with the dirty air off the back of Rick and washing out wide, managing to keep it out the wall. Scott comes through P5, Lyric through in P6, Rick will take P7, Sharka gets P8 right at the end, and JP3 through for P9. Don Mikado, not far behind that battle in the end, will round out the top 10. And the final two on the lead lap will be McQuiz and then Yip 242, J Turbo, CZ Adam, Bonival, P13, 14, 15. Sir Skov with that big moment while he was battling up front for P4, drops down to P16. And then Dennis, Slicker, both having a long pit stop early in the race after, I would assume, contact between the pair. Pren, again, issues throughout, and a couple of non-finishers who have already left. But a very exciting first race there. Plenty going on, very clean at the start, and then everything went on beyond. Guido Christ, a race to forget. Coming on with the comment. Like I say, I missed the specific incidents there, but definitely something happened early on, and yeah, the recovery went astray. But P1 in race 1 goes to Tinnis. Michelin Man second after taking the lead early. Jazzman having to settle for third after a mistake all on his own after taking the lead back from Michelin Man in the early stages. So that rounds out the podium, and that will round out the first race of the season. But definitely a strong showing from a lot of drivers there, and a brilliant race to kick us off for season 10, and hopefully more of the same to come for the rest of the season. I am going to very soon stop talking because 90 minutes on my own is definitely killing my voice off. But round 2 will be at Zandvoort. That will be a 1 hour race, and I believe that is a dry race. I could be wrong. No, I'm completely wrong. That race will be in the wet, so there will be guaranteed rain at Zandvoort, which will give a different test to what the drivers faced here today. But I will sign off from this one here, but congratulations to Tinnis on the opening win of the season, and I will see you next week for round 2 at Zandvoort.